In the freezing winter of 1346, the Mongol army was facing total annihilation, but they weren't losing to swords, arrows, or brilliant military tactics. They were losing to an invisible monster, a horrific, burning sickness that turned a healthy man's blood to poison in less than 72 hours. With his army rotting from the inside out, the Mongol commander looked at the towering, unbreakable stone walls of his enemy and made a terrifying, unprecedented decision. He realized he didn't need to break those walls down with brute force. He just needed to turn his own dead soldiers into weapons. This is the dark, true story of the day history's most ruthless empire weaponized death itself. To understand the sheer desperation that drove this unthinkable event, we have to look at the target, the ancient city of Caffa. Located on the coast of the Black Sea, on the Crimean Peninsula, Caffa was no ordinary settlement. It was a massive, ultra-wealthy trading fortress operated by the Genoese, elite, powerful merchants from Italy. During the 14th century, Caffa was the ultimate gateway between the East and the West. Millions of dollars worth of silk, exotic spices and gold flowed through its heavily guarded gates every single year. Because the Italian merchants knew exactly how valuable this trading post was, they spent a massive fortune building monumental, double-layered stone walls that wrapped entirely around the city. Even worse for an invading army, Caffa sat directly on the ocean. If an enemy completely surrounded them on land, the Italians didn't panic. They simply used their massive navy to sail in endless food, fresh water, and reinforcements directly from Europe. But in 1343, the Mongol Golden Horde, led by the ruthless commander Jani Beg, arrived at the gates. The Mongols were the most dominant military force the world had ever seen. They had conquered everything from northern China to the borders of Europe, using unmatched horse archery, brutal psychological warfare, and advanced engineering captured from across Asia. Jani Beg completely surrounded Caffa, cutting off all land routes and trapping the merchants inside. He ordered his engineers to build massive, heavy-duty siege engines, pounding the outer stone walls day and night with massive boulders. But weeks turned into months and months turned into years. The Italian walls barely flinched. Inside the city, the merchants were eating fine food and drinking wine shipped across the sea. Outside the walls, the Mongol army was stuck in the freezing mud, running out of supplies and growing increasingly furious. In the winter of 1346, the situation went from bad to apocalyptic. It started with a few soldiers coughing up blood in their tents. Within days, thousands of Mongol warriors were collapsing across the camp. They developed hideous, agonizing black swellings in their armpits and groins, some growing to the size of apples. Their skin turned black as their internal organs failed, and they died in excruciating pain. This was the bubonic plague, the Black Death. It had traveled silently along the Silk Road trading routes, riding on the backs of fleas and rats, right into the Mongol camp. The Mongol army was completely paralyzed. More than half of Jani Beg's men died in a matter of weeks. Jani Beg knew he had lost the war. He knew he had to order an immediate retreat to save what little remained of his empire. But his pride and fury wouldn't let him leave empty-handed. If his army was destined to die in the mud, he was going to make sure Caffa died right along with them. Jani Beg ordered his remaining healthy soldiers to gather the plague-ridden, bloated corpses of their fallen comrades. But they weren't preparing them for a funeral. They loaded the decomposing, infected bodies directly into the leather pouches of their giant trebuchets. With a collective pull of the heavy ropes, the catapults fired. The infected corpses soared through the foggy night sky, clearing the towering stone walls and raining down directly into the crowded streets, homes, and public markets of Caffa. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated horror of the Italian citizens. They woke up not to the sound of breaking stones, but to the sight of rotting, plague-infected remains of their enemies exploding onto their doorsteps. The Genoese merchants desperately tried to handle the crisis. They gathered the scattered body parts as fast as they could and dumped them into the deep ocean to cleanse the streets. But it was completely useless. The blood, infected fluids, and thousands of plague-carrying fleas had already contaminated the city's narrow pathways and touched their water supply. The invisible monster was now inside the unbreakable fortress. Within days, the citizens of Caffa began to sprout the exact same agonizing black boils. Terrified and watching their families die around them, the surviving Italian merchants panicked. They scrambled onto their remaining wooden warships, untied the ropes, and fled Caffa, steering their ships across the Mediterranean Sea. They were heading home to Italy, desperate to escape the nightmare. But they didn't realize they were carrying the end of the world with them. When those ships finally docked in Sicily, Italy, and France, ghostly crews of dead and dying men stepped off onto the piers. The plague had officially escaped into the European continent. Over the next 4 years, that single, desperate decision by a frustrated Mongol commander wiped out an estimated 25 to 50 million people. Nearly 1/3 of Europe's entire population vanished from existence.